To get 30 million through the door for Tim Ringbunum and Omari Kellyman is a fantastic bit of business for the club.
Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, we've barely had time to sleep and so much is happening. Tim Ringbunum has officially now left Aston Villa. At the time of recording, we're still waiting for the Lewis Dobbin deal to go through. But sorry, my throat is still on the ropes, as you guys can probably clearly tell. But we've got, I don't really want to call this an exciting bit of news, mate, but I guess, it's a development in the sort of Maatsen transfer, isn't it? And the big news that came out today, coming from Matt Law again, is that Omari Kellyman is heading to Chelsea. Like, what? Like, we only spoke about this yesterday, didn't we, mate? About like the sort of just how broken PSR is, but this is just it's complete nonsense, really, isn't it?
It's crazy, mate. It's crazy. I think the first thing to say, and on this podcast, if we have a calling card, it's that we always like to start out with a glass half full way of looking at things. Two great fees for these players, right? To generate the best part of £30 million from Tim Ringbunum and Omari Kellyman, both of which, even through their entire Villa careers, have been bit part at best, is some pretty impressive work, and that extends further than Monchi. It goes, right from the top all the way right through the club, and the work that we've been putting into the academy to increase its reputability, to increase the quality of the players that are coming out, and to try and put it into a position, funnily enough, like the club that we are selling Omari Kellyman's to, Chelsea. Virtually any player that comes out of Cobham, automatically the bar is set up for about £20 million if you want to go and buy them, and then the more that they get exposure, be that at Chelsea or on loan, it just goes up and up and up, and also all of a sudden you get guys like Armando Broja, Trevor Chalobah, these kind of guys, Conor Gallagher, that all of a sudden, if you want to go and get a deal done for any of those guys, you can be looking up to £50 million. And so it looks like Villa, slowly but surely, are getting ourselves kind of into that threshold. And whilst, as you say, it's nonsensical, given that this seems to be the counterweight in the Ian Maatsen deal. I think an interesting discussion that you and I can have a moment, mate, is what this means for the Jhon Duran deal. Is that still on the cards? But, I mean, if you look at this on the surface in the context of Villa trying to navigate ourselves around these tricky PSR waters that we're in, to get 30 million through the door for Tim Ringbunum and Omari Kellyman is a fantastic bit of business for the club.
It is, and it's frustratingly good because, as you said, mate, to kind of compete with the big boys, you have to sort of take this model. And if you look at even like Man City have, more recently probably been a little bit better than Chelsea in that respect you've only got to look at guys like James Trafford, Taylor Howard-Bellis in recent years who've left. Even Morgan Rogers is an example of that. Although they didn't get a fortune directly, they got a percentage of what we gave Borough. So it kind of, this is the food chain now. And while it's not great, as we sort of spoke about on yesterday's pod, mate, in regards to, you want that sort of connection between, the homegrown players. And, people will throw up the argument, well, Tim signed from West Brom and he was only here for 3 years, and Omari even less than that from Derby. The point still stands. They're still from the area. I believe they're both Villa fans as well, to my knowledge. And it's like, it's sad, but it is what it is, and you can't really turn your nose at 30 million. And when you look at the outgoings that we've had from the academy in the past, 2, 3, 4 years, it's absolutely insane. You get 100 million for Jack Grealish, you sell Cam Archer for 20 mil, albeit you have to buy him back for 10. Aaron Ramsey's gone for 12 million. Tim's gone for 9. This is now Omari going for 19, 20. Carney went for 20, 25 maybe. it's sort of it's propped us up, and it's maybe supported some bad business when you look at deals like Danny Ings, and there'll definitely be a few others included in that. And when you look at maybe the finances in isolation of like the Dean deal, things like that, this sort of helps us cover our back and make sure that PSR, FFP, whatever it is, for the short term at least, isn't going to be a problem.
This is absolutely right, mate. I think the important thing to note here is that PSR basically governs how much money you can lose. And so it's not that when we talk about balancing the books, it's not like our profit and loss from transfers have to be equal. All that we do is make sure that whatever the kind of the benchmark is on the accounting side, that, I don't really think anybody's too privy to, that the amount that we're spending and losing year over year as a club, most of which is going to be on transfer revenue, is kind of counteracted by the amount that we're selling players for. And so whilst, as you rightly say, the 30 million that we picked up for Tim and for Omari don't stack up, the Danny Ings deal, the Felipe Coutinho deal, the Leander Dendoncker deal, those kind of signings, all of which, really start to add up. You're getting well over 30, close to 40 million spent on those players. And so it just goes to show really, you can really look at these deals for Omari and for, for Cam, for AJ as well, someone else who, we accepted some money for Tim, as a fantastic bit of business. But it's amazing how quickly, when you're spending money, how quickly, you can back him up all of the amount that you've just earned. And so, I mean, it looks like Ian Maatsen is very close. And so it's, when you look at, for a net spend of 5 million, you're getting Ian Maatsen through the door for Tim and for Omari Kellyman. That's a fantastic bit of business for the club. It really is. And so, but yeah, I mean, my immediate question here is what does this mean for the Jhon Duran deal? Because we've seen with Everton, with the Lewis Dobbin coming in, that it's been 1 in, 1 out. And so with Chelsea, it's always been the same. There is 2 players involved in the deal with Juve, so it's not unprecedented. I think the main thing to caveat is that Juve one is very much billed as a swap deal. I don't think these ones with Everton and with Chelsea are necessarily packaged in the same way. I think they will be seen on the books as 2 separate deals between 2 clubs. But I think it is really interesting, mate, and maybe this is just a coincidence, but that all of the clubs that we've been dealing with so far in this window are in real trouble financially. Like Juventus, a lot of Italian clubs suffered pretty seriously through the pandemic. Juventus haven't been reaching the same heights that they have been in recent years, haven't been progressing as far in the Champions League. We know that they've been struggling financially. It's, they were a massive part of the Super League push and everything like that. We know all about Everton's struggles financially. The same with Chelsea. You imagine they've got PSR troubles of their own looming around the corner. And so whether that is purely coincidence or whether this is a case of a network of 4 clubs all trying to help each other out through these kind of financial restrictions is certainly an interesting case, mate.
Super League 2.0? Is that what we're hearing? Is that what it is? But no, you're right, mate. I think the thing is as well, like when you look at it, like Duran, we're sort of left in an interesting bit of limbo with Duran, right? Matt Law is reporting that Chelsea are still interested in Jhon Duran, despite the sort of Kellyman deal and the Maatsen deals and how they're both working in tandem. But I think we mentioned it on yesterday's pod as well. It kind of seems like they're taking a bit of time, doing some background checks on Jhon personally, which may not sort of go in our favour in terms of getting this deal done. But like, should Duran leave, and maybe it won't be for the 40 mil if we're getting Omari, and if with Maatsen and all this already happening, speaking purely in hypotheticals, we're talking about another 30 million euros, pounds potentially for an outgoing player. We've already all the reports from Fabrizio and Ornstein are saying that the fee that Juve are going to pay in part of this exchange is 30 million. That's nailed on. We've already got 30 million in exchange for these 2 academy prospects leaving. We're talking another 30 million. It's not even July, mate, and we've had 90 million's worth of outgoings. So it does leave us in an incredibly strong position to go and spend. And I guess, Duran is. I think the thing we haven't spoke about with Duran is who the hell replaces this guy. How do you go out and sign a replacement for Jhon Duran? Because the main issues that and again they're all alleged and they're all reportedly for legal reasons. Please don't sue the Villa Filler podcast, Jhon Duran. Of his attitude and him not wanting to play second fiddle, which I admire in many ways, but when Ollie Watkins is number one, you can't really be kicking up a fuss. Looking purely through those optics, mate, like we're gonna have to be phoning parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters of any transfer target to make sure that we're not signing somebody with the same alleged petulance as Duran.
It's really interesting, isn't it, mate? Like I look at Jhon Duran, and I mean, if I'm Chelsea, he is exactly the type of player that I would not be signing. Like that attitude, like we saw flashes of it. I can't remember the game it was last season. I mean, Fulham comes to the top of my mind. It might be totally incorrect. Do you remember what I think it was Madueke and Cole Palmer squabbling over that penalty?
Yes.
And like you just look at instances like that, and it's like, especially with Thiago Silva leaving the club, I think from a leadership point of view, and this isn't a Chelsea podcast, but like it leaves like a gaping, like who is the leader in that dressing room? I mean, the kind of leadership that Thiago Silva must have been instilling on that club. You need someone that's going to come in and like replace that. Who's the older statesman? Like who's the vet in that dressing room that the younger guys are going to look up to? You add a Jhon Duran, who I do think it's fair to say that at this point, there have been so many reports about issues with Jhon Duran in the dressing room. And I think you combine it with what McGinn said, that I think it was after the Liverpool game, where he said basically he's a bit of a nightmare. And he said it a bit tongue-in-cheek. I think it was actually meant kind of in jest, but that's really rare, actually, that you see like teammates. Normally post-match interviews are so sanitized, so thought out. Players go through like media training, and they're usually carbon copies of every other like post-match interview that you see. So for like the skipper to come out and be like, yeah, he's a bit of a nightmare in the dressing room, kind of tells you that something's going on. There've been a lot of reports. Obviously, there was the infamous toe infection that kept him out for a couple of months at the back end of 2023. And then we know that, I think you can tell by his celebrations at point, to be honest with you, that he thinks he's been owed more minutes, which I do think we have to caveat is not a bad thing. I don't mind players with confidence, to be honest with you. I think where it borderlines arrogance, I think, the best players need to have that. But it is when it starts to come into a problem. And the problem is with the quality of Ollie, we're starting to come into a place where that, I'm not saying that we're quite in this bracket yet, but with, that Tottenham Hotspur struggled with for years with Harry Kane to find a striker that's willing to come and be their number two, that Bayern Munich struggled for years with Robert Lewandowski, that Real Madrid did for years with Ronaldo and Benzema. Like, it's so difficult to find a player that's willing, particularly at Villa, who is a second tier of clubs. You will get players willing to go to a Bayern Munich, a Real Madrid, a Man City, just to like be a part of those clubs and those teams. But to come to a club like Villa, who are still knocking on the door of Europe's elite, and be willing to be a backup striker is interesting. And I think that whilst in an ideal world, we probably wouldn't have Ollie playing as much football as we had. It's not like, I mean, Ollie starts basically every game for Villa, but I don't necessarily think that's what we want to be the case. I think we would say to a backup striker, look, ideally we want Ollie Watkins playing, 30, 35 games a season, and all the cups, maybe some of the European games, like the second half of Premier League games, like that's where you're going to come in. And so it's a very difficult operation, and I think it is almost more about attitude than ability, to be honest with you. And so I think, to be honest with you, I think it'd be interesting to see with what happens with Cameron Archer. Like, if the rumours are true and he does have to come back, like, is he good enough? Is he good enough to be that second striker? I think the jury's still out. I still don't think, even with a move to Sheffield United, there's enough of a sample size there. So that is, and it's the same with backup goalkeeper. It's virtually the same position in that they're almost as difficult to recruit for as each other.
Yeah, I think there's one name, the ultimate backup striker, the ultimate journeyman, somebody who has failed upwards. I think I'm being a bit harsh there. Choupo-Moting is the ultimate backup striker, isn't he? You need to find a guy with that kind of humility and ability, because he is, was genuinely a really good player. But I don't think anyone foresaw him going to Bayern, PSG, Bayern again after his period of time at Stoke. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But yeah, it's really difficult to sort of recruit for, and I think when it comes to Cam, I don't think he's the answer, and it really pains me, because you can go back for both of us, mate, any podcast. Cam Archer was him. He was that guy. But I think, from what I've heard, I think he just, really struggled for confidence this season. And, that can obviously, it can change massively. But I think the sort of Sheffield United fans would have expected a lot more, considering the sort of the signs that they saw early on. You've got that brace against Everton that was early on, and he's, he scored, I think, like 5 or 6 goals over the season, which, ultimately just isn't good enough for where we are. If it's not good enough for a team fighting relegation, unfortunately, the cold, hard facts of the matter are that it's not going to be good enough for where we're at now, which is a shame, because I do really like Cam and I think he's got potential, but I just don't think it's going to happen here. So yeah, where does that leave us? Like, backup strike, as you said, they're so notoriously hard to recruit. I'm sure Monchi has somebody who's playing in the 3rd division of Spain or Italy or somewhere like that. As long as I tell you what, as long as it's not your fella El Cabi, then I'll be fine. Because all the people that were like, sign this guy, no, he's having a purple patch. Like, we were witnessing the purple patch in real time. Like, he's gonna be back in Qatar next season. Like, he's gonna be nowhere.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and he's past 30, I believe, so it's not the right profile. I mean, I've seen us linked with, and I mean, by no one reputable, but someone like Joshua Zirkzee, right? Who's just lit up Serie A at Bologna, who themselves are in the Champions League. There is no way a player like of that is going to leave an already Champions League club in Italy, where they've just ripped up the league, to be like, yeah, I'll go and be second fiddle at Villa. Absolutely no way. Like, and so you are going to have to shop in that kind of second tier of striker. But again, you can't drop too far down, because, as you rightly say, mate, with like, you get someone like, ideally you want someone young, you want someone that's going to develop, and you want someone that, to be honest, secretly offers a bit of a contingency planning to say that, if over the next few seasons we are either put or enter a situation where we're selling Ollie Watkins, that starts to fill his shoes and starts to learn and can develop and offer you a kind of a comfort blanket, so that, if you do either sell Ollie Watkins, or God forbid he has a long injury, which is something that we've been very lucky with for a long time, that Ollie Watkins has remained very much injury free, that we don't have to worry too much about and kind of stepping in. And so we've seen, rightly or wrongly, how much the vibe around the stands, around the team changes when Robin Olsen is in goal for Villa. And I think it is the same right up the other end. And one thing I will give to Jhon Duran is that, attitude aside, he was probably everything that you could want for that position. Like, he was young, he was hungry on the pitch, he had a great attitude, he would put himself around, he was aggressive, he'd come on and rough up defenders, and was a kind of almost polar opposite profile-wise to Ollie Watkins, which is perfect in terms of mixing up games and everything like that. It's just off the field that there's been problems. And with Jhon Duran, you always knew that he had a goal in him as well, particularly a lot of his goals coming in situations where he was handed very limited minutes. And so I think it is a real shame that just off the pitch, he's not been the right fit for the club, because on it, he was great, really, and was getting better year after year. You think about the season when he first signed, and goals just looked a million miles away. And then you flash forward a year on, and he's coming on, grabbing a brace against Liverpool and changing games, scoring away at the Etihad, having all these big moments, scoring in Europe. And he was on a really good trajectory. And it's just a shame that, like, mentally, it's not quite right for him, because he was doing everything we could have asked for, really.
Yeah, I think we're going to look back on this one in maybe not the immediate future, but sort of 3, 4, 5 years, and go, man, like, maybe he was the one that got away. But yeah, guys, we'd love to know your thoughts on all of these dealings, really. I don't know why, for some reason, the end of the podcast cut off on YouTube. I can only apologise for that, guys. You just missed us sort of blabbing on about, the usual outro kind of stuff on that Matson pod. But rest assured, plenty of content coming at you guys over the next few days. So we would both appreciate it if you make sure you subscribe, hit a like, comment your thoughts below. If you're listening on Apple and Spotify, download, share with a friend, follow. It all helps more than you guys could ever imagine. And before my voice gives out, like, comment, subscribe, and up the villa.